Researchers at McGill University recently published a paper showing that child marriage is not only legal in Canada, but also happens across the country in spite of efforts by the federal government to clamp down on the practice overseas. Why does it persist and what should be done about it? Let's hear from one of the researchers on that study, and that's Alissa Koski. She's assistant professor in the Department of Biostatistics and Occupational Health at McGill University, and she joins us from Montreal, Quebec. We also welcome in East York, in the provincial capital, Rowena Pinto, who's the Chief Program Officer at UNICEF Canada. Delighted to have you two aboard for this very disturbing, I must say, conversation and topic. And Alissa, let's just start with the basics. How are you defining child marriage?
Good place to start. Child marriage is any marriage before the age of 18. And that includes what we refer to as both formal and informal marriages. Formal marriages are, I think, what many Canadians picture when they hear the word marriage. You have some sort of ceremony, religious or civil, and you have a marriage certificate. But it also includes informal marriages, which are what we often refer to as common law marriages. So you're living together with a partner, and for all intents and purposes, you're married, but you don't have a marriage certificate.
Would a childhood betrothal, which is, I guess, common in some ethnic groups and some demographics, would that be included in this as well?
Typically, I think if the children are living together as though they're married, which typically means we're sharing a household, we're intimate partners, for example, then it would count.
Okay, when did the law change to allow 16-year-olds to get married?
The Civil Marriage Act was updated in 2015. Prior to that, each province and territory had a little more leeway in determining the minimum age at marriage. But in 2015, that minimum age was set at 16 across the country.
And why did they think, in the wisdom of the government of the day that did that, why did they think that was a good idea?
I wish I knew. I wish I had an answer for you. What is clear is that even at that time, under the Harper government, which was in power at the time, that they understood that child marriage meant any marriage before the age of 18. John Baird was doing a lot of advocacy around ending child marriage, even under the Harper administration. So this was a human rights issue that the government was very aware of at the time. Why they decided not to go with 18 as the minimum age and instead lower that to 16, I don't know.
Do we infer from your comments you don't think it was a particularly good idea?
Well, I'm wondering about that discrepancy. I'm wondering why, even at that time, we were advocating that other countries work to end child marriage. But then when we had the opportunity to put laws in place that would have helped us work toward that end, we opted not to.
Rowena, let's pick up the story now with you. Does UNICEF Canada keep track of child marriage statistics in Canada?
Not specifically, but we do actually obviously monitor it around the world, and not surprised that there is still a child marriage problem here in Canada. The conditions that promote child marriage, which are often marginalized populations, poverty, lack of education and information, children, girls being cut off from social networks. That exists here in Canada as well. So it is unfortunate to hear that our laws are not in line with the Convention on the Rights of the Child or the Convention on Human Rights, both of which actually, as Alissa was saying, state that child marriage is anyone married under the age of 18. And in fact, that is considered forced at any time around the world.
Okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second here, because we've titled this segment, "Is Child Marriage a Problem in Canada?" We're asking the question. You've just answered that question. You say it is, but let's go here anyway. If two young kids fall in love and want to get married and they're only 16, why is that a problem?
Well, I think from a global perspective, we've really seen what that does to girls, especially. So when girls get married very, very young, they often have children very young. Often their bodies are not even ready to have children, so there's actually higher rates of child mortality and maternal mortality. But children are then cut off from school. They're cut off from opportunities. Often, there's an opportunity to grow their skills. Girls especially become more cut off from social networks and from resources that can help them. And you're actually you're hurting both parties. If they're both children, both parties' futures. So I do think this is something that is an issue. We know we need certain aspects for a child to become and grow into a strong adult that has opportunities, and child marriage is not one of those ways.
All right. With that background in place, we want to introduce now somebody else to our conversation for whom this is all too real a topic. We welcome, in the downtown core of Ontario's capital city, Samra Zafar, author of A Good Wife, Escaping the Life I Never Chose, who is also a mental health and human rights advocate and speaker. Samra, how do we put this? You had experience as a child bride. Tell us a bit about your story, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I was a child bride at the age of 16. I was forced into marriage. I grew up in Abu Dhabi. I'm originally from Pakistan. And then I was actually shipped off to Canada as a child bride. So my marriage didn't happen in Canada. But I'm sure my immigration application came in front of some immigration officer, and my age at the time of marriage was under 18, but it was all perfectly legal. And I'm not surprised to learn that child marriage licenses are being issued in this country as we speak for children under 18. And to all the points that Rowena just mentioned, I have lived those. I became a teenage mother. My education was put to a stop. I suffered a lot of mental health issues, depression and anxiety and abuse and domestic violence. And the marriage just kept getting worse and worse and worse through the years until 10 years later, I was in a situation where I was afraid for my life. And the violence had escalated that it was, I thought, that I would be killed one day. I left eventually the marriage, and I went to university and completed my education and built a new life for myself and my daughters. And the reason I chose to tell that story is because I know all too personally that that story is not just my story. It is the story of millions and millions of girls around the world, and now we know thousands of girls in Canada too. And as an author, as I have traveled from coast to coast to coast doing book tours and speaking tours, I cannot tell you how many times I have heard stories from survivors of child marriage, from teachers, from educators who would tell me that girls in their classes are being taken away back home, or they're being forced into marriage here. One particular woman in Vancouver told me that when she was 16, her father signed off on some piece of paper, which was apparently a marriage kit from a drugstore shelf, and forced her to marry a 30-year-old man, and it was all perfectly legal. So a girl under 18 in Canada can't vote, can't buy alcohol, can't have property, cannot have a credit card, oftentimes cannot get custody of her children because she's a minor, but we're allowing her to enter the most important legal contract of her life, which is marriage, all with the signature of a parent or legal guardian.
Okay, thank you for that, Samra. Let me jump in with some follow-up questions if I can, and forgive me if these are personal, but I mean, your story is so important to us better understanding this whole issue. Did you love your husband when you first met him?
I didn't even know him. I hadn't even met him before the day of my wedding. So I had no idea what love was back then. I was 16, and you just asked the question, if two 16-year-olds are in love, like, they're kids. I'm a mom to a 19-year-old, and she thinks she's absolutely in love with her boyfriend, and maybe she is, according to her definition right now. But is she ready and mature enough to get married? No. So, no, I wasn't. And after my marriage, for a little while, I thought I was, because in the beginning it was not that bad. It was good. And but now when I look back in hindsight, I had no idea who he was.
You were 16, and how old was he?
He was 29. He was 28, 29.
He was that much older than you?
Yeah, he was 11, 12 years older than I was.
Do you have any contact with him anymore?
No, absolutely not.
Does he see his children?
No, my kids don't see him. They've chosen not to see him.
Got it. So not his choice, your choice.
My kid's choice.
The kid's choice, yeah.
Yes.
When's the last time you had any contact with him?
Oh, it's been years. We sometimes, my older daughter, for example, just started university, so I informed him that she has, but that's not really any kind of meaningful contact. He's not involved in our lives at all.
Now, were you in a position, I mean, it seems obvious on the face of it what the answer to this is, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Were you able to say no when your family told you, here's the guy you're marrying and you're doing it now?
No, I wasn't. And there was an illusion of no. And I'm just going to elaborate on that point a little bit, that oftentimes people think force is having a gun put to your head or a knife to your throat and a child being taken kicking and screaming against their will into some room and tied up or whatnot. But that's not what force really looks like in real life. Force is coercion, it's pressure, it's setting expectations that are unrealistic on a child who doesn't want to disappoint their parents. And in my case, that's what happened. The whole family orchestrated this. Everybody was super happy about this. And me, as a 15, 16-year-old girl who was naive, and in high school, I was in grade 11 when I was first informed of this, I tried to resist in my own little ways, like, no, I'm scared, or I don't want to do this, or I'm having nightmares about this. But everybody would tell me, like, no, this is the best thing that could happen to you. How can you be so ungrateful? How can you go against this? And when everyone around you tells you that, as a child, you just don't want to disappoint your parents. So that survivor in Vancouver said, well, if my father even took me in front of a judge and the judge asked me, well, I don't want to upset my dad. And if he's saying to me that if you don't marry this man, you're not going to be part of the family anymore and we won't love you anymore. So even though it may have been, I could have said no and run away, but no child will do that. So realistically, no, there is no choice. And no 16-year-old or 17-year-old should even be given that choice or put into that position.
Understood. Thank you very much for answering those questions. I know this is all very personal, but it really helps us understand this issue better. Rowena, let me get you back into the conversation here. Where in this world, as in what countries or regions, is this a particular issue?
Well, overall, about 12 million girls get married under the age of 18 globally. The areas that have the biggest proportion of girls getting married under the age of 18 are sub-Saharan Africa. About 35% of girls get married there, and about 30% of girls in South Asia. But there is a global effort to end child marriage. The problem is that with the pandemic, we're actually worried that a lot of the progress that we've seen happen in this, where we went about 25 years ago to about 1 in 4 girls getting married under the age of 18 to now 1 in 5, we'll actually see this number grow over the next decade with an additional 13 million girls getting married under the age of 18.
Alissa, do we have any sense about what percentage are forced into marriage, as was the case with Samra, and what percentage choose it of their own volition, even though they're underage?
Well, as Rowena said, in some interpretations, children under the age of 18 aren't in a place to actually give their consent to a contract such as marriage. So in some interpretations, all child marriages could be considered forced, but there are no great statistics that separate child marriage from forced marriage explicitly.
And is this a thing in Canada?
Absolutely. The research that I just completed shows that we have given marriage certificates to children under the age of 18 in literally every province and territory across the country. And Steve, I want to go back to a point that you raised a few minutes ago. You played devil's advocate and asked about a 16-year-old and another 16-year-old. It's a nice thought, right? And it's something that I'm often asked when I talk about my research. What about 2 young kids who are just a bit precocious? The data that I have from across the country show that that is almost never the case. This is something that's happening overwhelmingly to girls in Canada, and that's very reflective of the child marriage patterns that the Rowena is talking about in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. And we find that in many cases, these are young girls who are being married to much older men. In Canada, we've seen cases as extreme as 16-year-olds married to men over the age of 50.
Well, we have a chart here that we want to bring up, and I wonder if you would sort of guide us through this. And we do have a number of people listening to us right now on podcast as opposed to being able to see this chart. So I wonder if you could describe it in some detail here. These are marriage certificates granted to those age 16 and 17, and we take a look at 5 provinces in particular: Alberta, BC, Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec. And the lines Well, you can take us through this, but the answer is not zero. This is still happening quite a bit. Why don't you take us through this?
Sure. This is a table taken from the research that I recently published, and it shows how common child marriage is in these 5 provinces: Alberta, British Columbia, Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec between the years 2000 and 2018. And what we see is that this practice is ongoing in all of those 5 provinces, and I can tell you that it is in the rest of the country as well. It's not just these 5. We also see that this is becoming slightly less common over time in nearly all of these provinces, but we do see a difference in the prevalence across the country. In particular, Alberta and Manitoba and Saskatchewan, in addition to those, tend to have higher rates than Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia. So
Why
we
do you
do
think?
see differences in how common. Again, I would love to know the answer to that question. I don't have a clear answer for you right now. This was the first study that looked at child marriage in Canada. So it's really our first effort to get a sense of how common it is.
Do you take some satisfaction, though, in the fact that the chart may have started up here, but as it went across, it did go down? I mean, this looks like a problem that is solving itself, if we can put it that way, in as much as the forces that are against this practice happening seem to be prevailing. And if we assume that the lines are going to continue to go in that direction, might this be a problem in Canada, at any rate, that disappears within a decade?
Well, the lines certainly are going down, which means they're moving in the right direction. But again, as Rowena said, this is a trend that we're seeing across the globe. Right? Child marriage rates in the last 20 years have gone down fairly substantially in just about every country where we look at this. That said, I don't think there's a reason to believe that child marriage just goes away if you don't address the underlying causes of it. Rowena mentioned some of them: gender inequality, the idea that girls should get married at very young ages, poverty, lack of access to education or jobs that they may want. So I don't think there's a reason to believe that this is just something that peters out of its own accord. Mm-hmm. And I will say that in every country where it remains legal, for example, in many countries in Western Europe, Canada is certainly not alone in continuing to permit child marriage, that this still continues to happen at very low levels. So I don't know of a country that continues to legally permit it where it simply doesn't happen anymore.
I'm going to ask our director, Sheldon Osman, top of page 4, Sheldon, if you would. Let's get these statistics up, because while we've been very clear on the impact on young girls of child marriage, there's an impact on boys, too. So let's bring this chart up here. An estimated 115 million boys and men around the world were married as children. Of these, 1 in 5 children, or 23 million, were married before the age of 15. Rowena, let's look at the other side of this coin. What effect does this have on young boys?
Well, it's probably very similar. The percentage is less, obviously. But that being said, when you marry 2 children who don't have a lot of choice and are now forced into an adult relationship, you can imagine the stress that puts on young children. So this is a common practice. And as Alissa was talking about formal and informal unions, we see child marriages where both children are children. That's more prevalent in Latin America, for example. But again, when you have children married so young and engaging in sexual activity before they're ready, having children before they're necessarily ready, while they're still children themselves, you are cutting them off from their futures. That really, really does narrow their ability to really move forward in a way that we would like it to see all children be given the opportunity. We are stealing their childhood by enabling this.
Samra, I wonder if I could come back to you with the next question, and that is, you are, through the course of your book tour and your speaking engagements, obviously trying to fight the good fight against this practice. Do you think you're making any headway?
Well, I mean, I just looked at the chart you put up, and we were talking about the numbers going down. Where I come in is that even 1 is too many, like I said, I've personally lived it, but I've also seen it with so many women reaching out to me every single day on social media in Canada who are telling me that they have been either brought in as child brides or they have been forced into marriage here. So the numbers that we're seeing don't even take into account the girls that are being brought into the country, like myself, or the girls that are being taken back home in the summer vacation for whatever reason and forced into marriage there. So I think these numbers are understated and definitely they kind of give you a glimpse of the problem of child marriage. But I think if you take into account all those other ways that child marriages happen and child brides continue to be brought into the country, I think the numbers in reality would be a lot higher.
Let me do a follow-up on age, because you pointed out your husband back in the day. You were 16. He was a decade older, more than a decade older than you. Is that typical, or is it more similar aged people are being married off?
Exactly what Alissa said. That is in the majority of child marriages are underage girls with older men, and that's why child marriage almost always results in abuse, because it's already starting from a place of power imbalance. A lot of these girls don't even know their basic rights in this country. When I came here as a child bride, I thought that I would be deported if I reported the abuse or if I chose to walk away from him when the violence started happening. I had no idea about my rights, about what options I had, and I stayed for a very long time because I had no way of going outside and even getting any kind of information. So a lot of these girls aren't aware of their rights. They are completely dependent financially, emotionally, and in every other way on that person, on that man who's now their husband. When there is such a gross power imbalance to start with, and abuse is all about power and control. And a lot of these girls are being controlled, and some of the cultural nuances that permit or propagate this atrocity is because they want to get young girls who can be controlled and molded and would kind of fall into the family. And in fact, I was told that by my parents-in-law. We all used to live together, and they would say to me, well, we picked you because we thought you were young and we could just mold you into whoever we wanted you to be.
And one more quick follow-up. Did your first really quite tragic experience with marriage sour you on the institution of marriage entirely for the rest of your life?
Not at all. Absolutely not. Quite the contrary. I'm an eternal optimist. I'm a very positive person, and I am very blessed to have a lot of good men in my life as friends, as mentors, and I love them to pieces. And when it happens, if that person comes along, I'm totally fine with going ahead with marriage. So no issues with marriage at all. I think what my experience was not depictive of all marriages in the world, that's for sure.
Okay, good to know. Alissa, let me get back to you now. What has Canada done in terms of committing itself to ending this practice?
Well, the government has really put itself out at the forefront of global efforts to end child marriage. Our federal government has co-sponsored United Nations resolutions on this issue. We give millions and millions of dollars to end child marriage internationally. And in fact, it's explicitly addressed in our government's current foreign policy. So essentially, we couldn't be doing much more on the international front to try to end this practice. The problem is, as I see it, that we've essentially turned a blind eye to the fact that child marriage remains legal and continues at home.
So the first thing, presumably, you'd like to see is a ban put in place on it, maybe raise the legal age to what?
If we raise the legal age to 18, that would certainly put us in line with our international commitments.
You think that's still too young, 18?
Well, if you're asking my personal opinion, I certainly wouldn't want to get married at 18, and I'm sure that a lot of children are not mature enough to do it at that point. But 18 is consistent with our notions of adulthood in much of Canada, right? When people turn 18, they're permitted to vote. We allow them to rent their own apartments. We allow them to buy alcohol, cigarettes, marijuana in most provinces, right? We assume that they've reached a level of maturity where they're able to manage those sorts of things. The fact that we allow marriage before we would allow access to those other rights seems to me like a very strange oddity. Mm-hmm. So again, raising the age to 18 would put us in line with what the Canadian government is already advocating that other countries do. So we're very much in a pot calling the kettle black sort of situation here.
And just to get a better understanding of in Canada who does this, we may be under the impression that it is, I mean, if we take Samra's example, it's people from somewhere else, right, who've immigrated to Canada. They may have different customs from those communities or demographics that have been here for multiple generations. Is that in fact the case?
It used to be. When we looked at the Canadian census in 2001 and 2006, we did find that children who were born outside of Canada were slightly more likely to get married as children than their peers who were actually born here in Canada. But in more recent years, by the time of the 2016 census, that has changed. And children who are born in Canada are now more likely to be married as children than those who are born outside the country. So the idea that this is a practice that's happening primarily among immigrant communities or those who may have been married as children and coming in to the country from somewhere else doesn't hold water in more recent years.
Rowena, let me give you the last word on this. What do you think the government of Canada ought to do about this immediately?
Well, as Alissa said, changing the law would be a first great step. It would send a really strong message. But we can't really stop there. We've seen in other parts of the world, even countries that have outlawed child marriage still have issues with it. It does require education. It requires a real deliberate effort to change social norms. Our education system needs to address this and build agency amongst children, especially girls, so that they know their rights and they know and they have confidence to know that this is not their only option in life. And we have to deal with the income inequality, which is often a huge issue. So there's a lot of, we have to look at a multi-pronged approach on this. It's not as easy as changing a law. It will require education. Our school systems have to support girls more. We have to look at income security, food security, and we have to look at better resources for girls everywhere.
I think we know a lot more about it right now than we did a half an hour ago, and that's thanks to Alissa Koski from McGill University, Samra Zafar, and we are happy to recommend her book, The Good Wife, Escaping the Life I Never Chose, and Rowena Pinto from UNICEF Canada. My thanks to the three of you for coming on to TVO tonight and sharing your views. Take care out there, okay?
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.